Good afternoon, everyone, and you're so welcome to today's event. Thank you so much for coming out. We've got some fantastic panelists who are going to be joining me on this stage later today. But first of all, I want to welcome Laura Mackin from Liberty IT to the stage to do our first intro. So, big round of applause for Laura.
Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Pride. My name is Laura Mackin, and I am representing Liberty IT here today, and also working with Pride. Myself and quite a few of our folks are active members of that very important network and community that represents organisations across Northern Ireland. We have a very much a shared learnings space, and it's really a place for us to learn and feel inspired, and aligning our discussions with challenges and issues that could be impacting the LGBTQ plus community here in Northern Ireland. Today we have a fantastic lineup, and we're delighted to welcome you to a very special place that is the MAC. So thank you all to the team here who've helped us bring this event together. Belfast Pride is such a special week for our city. Its colour and its vibrancy are evident as you enjoy the city this week. It's also a real celebration of our progress. It's also a time for reflection. It's a time for us to listen to each other. And I think it's a great time for us to feel inspired and learn from each other as we all work together to progress our city and as a more inclusive one and keep going forward in our DEI journey. In terms of our organisational importance of DEI, it is of the utmost importance. Our Chief People Officer, Melanie Foley, is also the Global DEI Officer, and we're delighted that Melanie was able to join us today, joining us from Boston to be part of our panel today. Melanie, thank you. We're so delighted to have you here. Liberty IT invests in their people, and we are very focused in terms of pushing ourselves forward on our DEI journey. Largely, part of that is represented by our incredible impactful employee resource groups. We have a range of groups from Women in Tech to Pride, representing sustainability, accessibility and ability. We've mental health champions and also our choir. They all support our DEI goals and really firmly are helping contribute to what is making Liberty IT continuously an official great place to work across the UK and Ireland. And now I'm delighted to welcome the Lord Mayor of Belfast, Councillor Mickey Murray. Upon his election in office in June, Mickey has been extremely prevalent in the industry, talking about his vision for Belfast to make it a more inclusive, diverse and kinder city. And we are delighted to welcome him here today. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to the Lord Mayor of Belfast to join us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Good afternoon. It's a privilege to join you here today and I have the opportunity to gain insight and strategies from a panel of local and global thought leaders. This initiative is crucial in our shared effort to advance diversity, equity and inclusion in workplaces across Belfast. Your presence here signifies a collective commitment to building a more inclusive and equitable city, one which celebrates the richness and diversity of its population. As Lord Mayor of Belfast, I'm deeply committed to making our city a more inclusive and caring place during my year in office. Diversity, equity and inclusion are cornerstones of a thriving society. They ensure that everyone, regardless of their background, has the opportunity to contribute and succeed. This commitment is not just a political stance, but a moral imperative that reflects our values as a community. Throughout my term, I plan to highlight and celebrate the remarkable efforts businesses and organisations are making to promote DEI. It's essential that we recognise and support these initiatives as they are fundamental to creating an environment where everyone feels valued and respected. By showcasing your work, we can inspire others to adopt similar practices and continue to foster an inclusive culture throughout Belfast. My focus this year will be on connecting with a diverse array of individuals and groups that make up the fabric of our city. And this includes those who work tirelessly in the homeless sector, providing critical support and advocacy for our most vulnerable citizens. Community workers who dedicate themselves to breaking down barriers and fostering unity within our neighbourhoods. Supporting groups that bridge class and societal divides, promoting health, teamwork and a sense of belonging. Artists and musicians who bring our city to life with their creativity and passion, enriching our cultural landscape. and the LGBTQIA community, whose resilience and advocacy has significantly contributed to making Belfast a more inclusive and welcoming city. Your efforts in advancing DEI are not only beneficial to your organisations, but they're vital to the overall health and progress of our city. By creating inclusive workplaces, you're helping build a Belfast where everyone feels welcome, valued and included. Today's event provides a platform for sharing ideas, learning from one another and forging partnerships that can drive meaningful change. By coming together today, we're sending a powerful message that diversity, equity and inclusion are at the heart of Belfast's future. When people feel welcomed and included, they're more likely to be engaged, contribute and innovative. This leads to a more dynamic and competitive business environment and a more vibrant and cohesive community. Together, we can create a city where everyone has the opportunity to succeed, regardless of their background or circumstances. And today's event should be regarded as a catalyst for action. If we commit to advancing DEI within our organisations and throughout our city, we can ensure that Belfast is a beacon of inclusivity and compassion and a place where everyone can feel proud to belong. Happy Pride.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and conscious you probably have a busier week than most this week, so we really appreciate you making the time. Right, so folks, I think it's time to bring on the panel then, and I'm super excited to welcome this group of people. I think they've got so much to share with us today and hopefully lots of stuff to take away that's going to be useful. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage, first of all, Melanie Foley from Liberty Mutual Insurance. Give a round of applause. We've got Caroline van der Feltz from Danske Bank. Liz Skelcher from Stonewall. Jude Copeland from Cleaver, Fulton Rankin Solicitors. And last but by no means least, Emma Patterson Bennett from the BBC. Right, that was pretty smooth. I was happy with that. Conscious that I've just done a very, very brief introduction to everyone just to get you on stage, but can we do just a slightly deeper dive then into kind of your roles within your organisations, just to begin with, just a minute or two on what you do and kind of how your journey has sort of brought you to where you are today. So Melanie, do you mind if I start with you?
Happy to. So thank you for having me here today. We have diversity on the panel with an American executive joining this lovely group of Belfast natives. I am from Boston. I've been with Liberty Mutual for 28 years. I started my career in sales and marketing, and about 12 years ago, I took responsibility for our people, purpose, and brand functions. And most recently, while I've been overseeing DEI for the last 10 years, our DEI officer for the global company retired. And given the critical moment that we're in, especially in the US with DEI coming under attack, I wanted to carry the torch to make sure that the progress that we have made for the last 10 years did not take any steps back, but only we're continuing to propel forward. So I currently also lead our DEI efforts globally.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And as you said, it is a challenging time to do that. Caroline, and yourself?
I'm Caroline van der Feltz, and I'm the HR Director at Danske Bank. So we're the largest bank in Northern Ireland, and I have a really strong social purpose and conscience, as well as helping customers and colleagues thrive. We take our role for society incredibly seriously. So obviously, when thinking about driving the success of Northern Ireland, the space of DE&I, ensuring everybody is in the right environment and that they're able to thrive is very important, and they can set the standard.
Brilliant, thank you. And Liz?
Hi, my name is Liz. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the Workplace Programmes Manager for Stonewall in Northern Ireland, and I work in partnership with my colleagues at the Rainbow Project. One of my key areas of work is to support organisations such as Liberty in their LGBTQ plus inclusion work by delivering the Diversity Champions Programme, which is a kind of wraparound programme for organisations to help them look at all areas of LGBTQ plus inclusion.
Fantastic. And Stonewall, a great ally of working with Pride as well, as well have had on stage with me. And Jude, yourself?
I'm just here for beard representation on the panel.
Someone had to.
It's Jude Copeland, and I'm a solicitor in private practice. I'm a legal technologist, which is the worst of both lawyers and technologists, like just the most boring people. So to balance that out, I do a lot of activism, including I've run grassroots groups such as Queer Space. I elbow my way into becoming advisors for a number of Pride groups, including, I think this is an announcement, I think I can make it. There's going to be a Pride in Lurgan in October, and I am so excited. I know it's Belfast Pride, and I shouldn't be saying, sorry, first citizen, but Lurgan, like, getting a Pride.
Who'd have thunk it?
So really, yeah, I'm just here because I love Pride and I love diversity and inclusion. And I also do queer history tours with the Rainbow Project, Cara Friend, and Here NI. So actually, I love seeing how far we have come as a place, and the people that we just need to like bring along with us. The journey isn't complete yet.
Definitely. And those walking tours, if you get a chance over Pride Week or at any stage to do those walking tours, they're absolutely fascinating, really, really moving. They're deeply emotional stories that are told that need told. So then, Emma, what about yourself?
Thank you. So I'm Emma Patterson Bennett. I've been working at the BBC in Northern Ireland for 2 years now. It was a new role when I joined. There was always a diversity and inclusion unit right across the BBC, but they decided that they wanted someone locally, and it means that we can link in with things like working with Pride and just have that more local lens. I do their workforce D&I, so don't come up and ask me about why was there nobody in blue lights, because I have no control. But previously to that, my career started out, I worked in human rights for like 9 years, and I worked in equality and human rights for a long time. I worked at the Education Authority, and after that, and did a lot of their equality, diversity and inclusion work. So I suppose when I get stuck, and I might touch on this a bit later, or I think, where are we going? I always go back to, well, what is the baseline? What is human rights? What's equality? And how can we push this forward?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So my first question then is really about sort of your organisation's journey to this point. So where did it start? How far along do you feel that you are? Have there been big challenges or milestones recently? So Melanie, do you mind giving us a bit of a background of what that journey's looked like at Liberty?
Sure, and I feel really fortunate to be able to be on this panel representing Liberty IT, but I also would love to give a global perspective as well from the Liberty Mutual Insurance Group. Liberty Mutual Insurance Group has been on this journey for about 10 years. Before that time, people couldn't even spell diversity, never mind understand the importance of it. Back then, and even here in Ireland, we take an approach that is kind of guided in awareness and education. That's the first step that we take, is just creating awareness, starting with unconscious bias awareness training, creating an understanding of differences, and then using our resources to educate our employees about these differences. And then it's taking it into action or disruption. So that's next phase. And in some of our more mature DEI markets, we're actually moving into embedding DEI into our systems and really taking it to a leader-led place where every leader has the skills and capabilities to lead in a diverse, inclusive, and equitable way. I'm particularly proud of our employee resource groups across the globe. And here in Belfast, I've been able to spend time with 3 of those groups, our Women in IT, Pride, and ABLE, focusing on people of different abilities. And they're taking the same track. They're making sure that we're creating awareness for the differences, for the experiences that each other faces, and then coming up with programming solutions to bring people together in ways that amplify their voices, help us to understand as employers what are the policy changes that are needed for our employees so that they can bring their full selves to work, that they can feel a sense of belonging and a sense of equity in terms of being able to succeed and achieve their full potential, just like anybody else. And so really proud of that journey. But it's a journey that's never ending. And there's always challenges. And so there's still a lot to do.
Yeah, it really is a constantly evolving area, which is where, every time that you kind of think that you've got to a place, there is always going to be something else to focus on. So that I think that appreciation of that is really important. So Caroline, same question then. Can you give us a bit of an insight into Danske Bank's journey sort of up to now? I know that you guys are really, really engaged locally in the community too.
No, I mean, we kicked off diversity and inclusion in anger really about 2017. And we started with a range of different colleagues who, well, I guess it starts with the why. There was a growing sense that we needed to empower people. And I think when organisations are trying to build empowerment, to grow teams that are really managing themselves, I think most organisations have a fantastic organisational change story in their employee resource groups because they manage themselves. They don't seek permission, they ask forgiveness, they move on, they change, they disrupt. And I think there's lots of business actually can learn from how organisations do D&I well. So we started with a group of passionate colleagues. We connected it to the purpose of the organisation, which is around thriving. And it's really important to have that anchored in the purpose piece as well. It has to have a point. It has to have some impetus behind it. And I think they've built their ambition as it's gone. I think very much the view of what my role is in that, the executive sponsors, the chairs and the co-chairs that we have is around knocking down obstacles, providing funding, providing the opportunity and making sure that they can actually fill the space that's there. And I think that's really refreshing, especially in a banking mentality as well. I think we've had a couple of key milestones and I think they're important not for the recognition itself, but for the confidence that builds and the recognition that they're doing the right thing and it's valuable because sometimes it's tough. It's not an easy journey. It's not a branding journey. It's about a journey about change and it's about journey about lifting the bonnet on things that aren't the way that it needs to be and many, many times having difficult conversations, bringing taboo subjects, what was to be, into normal because that shouldn't be the case. So I think, there's two that I would pull out, Laura. The first is Diversity Mark Gold. So again, putting some rigour, putting some structure, putting ambition around targets is really important. You can't measure progress if you don't know what your baseline is and you don't know what your ambition is. And I don't think we set about solving any business problems by sitting around talking and having nice cultural conversations. You look at the problem, you put plans in place, you set targets to track your progress. And again, that's what we've done. So the achievement of Diversity Mark Gold as the first bank and the second organisation in Northern Ireland, I think has built an awful lot of confidence that they can do more and a bit more swagger. And I think the second, given that we're working with Pride, is obviously our achievements with Stonewall and the inclusiveness of the employee inclusiveness piece there, where we're really delighted that it was announced last week before last that we are the first organisation in Stonewall history ever to enter the top 100 at number 40, which is absolutely fantastic. And I'm absolutely delighted with the chairs of Angela and Kevin. So for us, that really has built a huge degree of confidence with Angela Guiney and Kevin Hevern, who are the co-chairs of our Rainbow Network and who do an absolutely amazing job. But those are really important staging posts. It's not the end, but it certainly builds that confidence.
Absolutely, and both very well deserved, and both Angela and Kevin do. They've done so much brilliant work. I'm big fans. And so Liz, just to come to you for a second. So Caroline touched a little bit there around measuring progress and targets, and having worked in this space myself for a long time, it can sometimes feel that so much of what we do isn't measurable or is really difficult to create targets for. Can you talk a bit about why it's important and how to go about identifying what you should be measuring?
I think the first thing to say is if you don't know who's in your organisation, then you don't know if your organisation is a psychologically safe space for everybody. So the first kind of measurement comes in my opinion, in just checking in that, do we have a diverse workforce? If we don't have a diverse workforce, then why don't we have a diverse workforce? And what do we need to do to change that? Because we know that diverse organisations do really, really well because you're bringing together people with lots of different lived experiences into one space, and everybody has their own sort of strengths and ideas to bring to the conversation. So if we're thinking about measuring, that would be sort of the first step. The other thing I would say is at Stonewall, we recommend different areas that you can measure. And we do this through our Workplace Equality Index. So it's an indices. Lots of organisations kind of offer indices measuring, and we do it specifically looking at LGBTQ plus inclusion. And we do that because the bar from the law is very, very low. Okay, so what we're asking organisations to do is you might be meeting all of your legislative requirements, for example, but are you meeting the needs of your people? Are you kind of leading the way on making sure that your organisation is where people are going to want to work and where people are going to want to stay and create that positive change? And Liberty IT and Danske are two really good examples of organisations that have done some really great work on measuring. What was the second part of the question?
How do you go about setting targets? And in a lot of our roles, we do end up having to do that, and it can be difficult sometimes to quantify what good looks like.
It can. So one of the things that we offer, and you can do this internally as well, is a staff satisfaction survey or a staff feedback survey. And thinking about what data you're collecting from people and how you're sort of breaking that data down to understand the different lived experiences of different groups of people. So we know, for example, public sector organisations have to report on kind of pay gap analysis, kind of in a very binary gender fashion. And what we're asking is to kind of think a little bit more broadly than that. So let's think about we had this conversation earlier on, have a think about who's applying for jobs in your organisation? What equality data are you collecting? Are there boxes there that people feel that they want to tick in terms of self-identifying? Are you using inclusive language? Do people feel safe disclosing some of their identity characteristics to your organisation? And then you can start doing that analysis about so many applications, how many of those came from the LGBTQ plus community, for example, and then successful appointments. And you can start mapping people's journeys. Knowledge is power. So once you know who you're talking to and what the experience of those people are, then you can start to make some of those positive changes.
Brilliant. And then last one before I move on to Jude. You've one more, Liz, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
It's around the data disclosure piece, because I know that that's something that a lot of our member networks kind of struggle with in terms of it is self-reported. We obviously can't force anyone to disclose. And there's often the conversation around, well, this means two things. Either we really don't have a diverse population, or people don't feel psychologically safe to be able to disclose that information. Have you any advice for anyone in the room who might be trying to get more sort of robust information, how to actually make that feel like that information is going to be used for something, or that it's safe to do so?
Yeah, it's really important to think about your messaging. It's really important to reassure people that their data is going to be held safely and confidentially as well. It's really important to make sure that the language you're using when you're offering, when you're trying to collect that data, is inclusive of different identities. So do your research, talk to organisations like Stonewall or the Rainbow Project, so that people can see themselves reflected. But the other thing is, it's a kind of, nothing's done in silo. So while you might be doing that piece of work, it's a long game. It's not a short game. You've got to keep your eye kind of over there somewhere of where you're headed, because it's about building up that culture of inclusiveness and safety, where people start to feel able to disclose. Remembering, of course, that not everybody from the LGBTQ plus community is out, maybe to themselves, maybe to their colleagues. So it's quite nuanced, and it's a slow burn. The other thing I would say very quickly is some organisations that have done this really successfully have diverse senior leadership teams who are out, or diverse boards who are out, and talk about their workplace experiences or their career path as an out person. So if you can't see it, you can't be it. So that's the other thing you can do in tandem, is kind of have some senior leaders who maybe are out talk about why they chose to disclose and what the organisation is going to do with that data to improve the organisation for minority groups.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And very, very valid point around representation as well. It makes a huge difference. Jude, I know you've got a bit of experience in your sort of industry around the measuring and data gathering piece. Can you speak a little bit to that experience?
Well, I, aside from being a solicitor, I'm on the Future of the Profession Committee of the Law Society, And I feel really, really privileged to do that because, you know, decriminalisation only happened 42 years ago. So there are lawyers who I know had to leave here to go to practice in London because they couldn't practice here because they were at risk of being arrested. And, you know, that has really stayed with me. But what I really, really loved doing, and I say loved very loosely, because the committee, we got together a little subgroup of people to go through and for the first time in the history of the society actually look at what our solicitor practice looked like. And it had weirdly, it had never been done before. And so we came at this with all of these preconceptions, but like a bit like you, but like more traumatic. We like, it's giving me flashbacks. So we had to actually figure out what we were measuring. And you think you know what diversity and inclusion and what DEI means until you get 4 lawyers round a room. And like I specifically remember that some of the questioning on do you consider yourself disabled? Do you consider yourself to have a disability? And it was actually really interesting because we all came at it from like really different ways. Because actually, sometimes, you know, I have asthma, so actually sometimes I can properly say, actually, I don't have a disability. But other times answering the question, it's like, well, no, it doesn't really have a long-term substantial impact, but it depends how the question's phrased. But it was really interesting. All of that data, we got like a brilliant response eventually. And what it did was it gave us like a map of what the profession looked like. And there were lots of really the value of it came through in the analysis. So we realised that actually, we asked a question about, you know, whenever you were going through school, did you receive free school meals? So we were actually sort of thinking about social value as a profession. So we were like, right, so how do we address that type of inclusion? And it was really, really interesting because we realised that actually there are more women in the profession than there are men. And it was really lovely to see other genders coming out and just peeking out there and it was nice that they felt secure enough to actually disclose that. But what was really interesting was that enabled us to pinpoint certain sort of pressure points. So basically, probably about 6 or 7 years into practice, a lot of women leave private practice and either go for a public sector role or they just leave practice entirely. So we're losing all of this talent. You know, we're getting all of these amazing lawyers in, but we're actually losing them. And, you know, why are we losing them and what can we do? And also, how can we get them to return back? So I'm really, really pleased that we ended up doing loads of like returners to law policy and actually what... you know, post-COVID and in a modern setting where we can all work hybridly and all of that stuff, like really you can work part-time from anywhere. So that's like one of my big success stories. I'm really pleased about that.
Absolutely. And a really good example of how a real robust data set informs proper strategy. And I think just there are a lot of organisations and employers that haven't quite grasped yet the importance of flexibility, which you referenced there, in terms of the inclusivity aspect of it, and that it's not, you know, there's been so many opinion pieces about people wanting to work from home or part-time, but it's such an easy win and it makes it much more accessible for lots of people for lots of different reasons. So Emma, you're next. So we've kind of talked a bit about the journeys to now and about how to identify sort of, you know, internally what your priorities should be. If you look out to the next sort of 12 to 24 months, what do you see as being the challenges for DEI professionals and for the industry as a whole, or the opportunities? What do you sort of see the landscape, both for BBC and then sort of more generally?
Well, the one that's for BBC and for everyone is like transformational change. Like there is not a sector that isn't going through some sort of change or, you know, having to cut budgets or you know, amalgamating departments and moving them, you know, so that is a big challenge. It's a big challenge for inclusion and belonging. You know, I'm coming along going, do you want to come to my inclusive language course? And they're saying, well, I don't know who my line manager is this week because I have to go over here or I might lose my job. So I understand that for DEI professionals, that is something that is difficult, but it's trying to make sure that the senior leaders in the organisation are bought in and know that inclusion and belonging hopefully will support this change and transformation. And I just love it when people go, when's the changeover? I'm afraid to tell you, it's not ever going to be over. So I think that's a massive challenge for everyone, and sort of linked to employee resource groups as well. I find that a lot of organisations we absolutely love our employee resource groups. You're like absolutely out there pioneering, doing everything you can, but then people get tired. And then they're also going through organisational change because of their job. And I think we need to be really careful that we're putting enough support around our really fantastic ERGs and not expecting them to sort of carry the load through. So there's definitely something on that. And, you know, I know a lot of us put funding into them and well-being and it, you know, and we work intersectionally and that's brilliant. But let's just remember that these people are also kind of voluntary doing that. So I think like that's definitely something. But for me, locally, I think the biggest wins for us as EDI professionals are working together, doing panels like this, learning from each other. And even the panel we went to this morning around domestic abuse and LGBT, like people have already done a lot of the work. So don't you think you have to go and do it? Like, you know, talk to me, talk to Jude, talk to anyone in this panel and say, like, do you have a policy in that or do you know what we could do? And that's our strength here.
That's why I love working with Pride, because you get to steal other people's brilliant ideas. I mean, it's not rocket science.
It's not.
So we're here for. No, I think that's a really good point. And actually at the Stonewall conference in Scotland last year, that was definitely one of the themes was collaboration, not competition. We've got so much to offer each other. And if we're trying to do it in silos, it just takes 10 times longer. Yeah. So Melanie, then I suppose the same question to yourself, kind of within your role and looking at the sort of the landscape across, and you said there are different areas of the organisation that are at different levels. What do you kind of see the next 2 years looking like for Liberty Mutual Insurance or for Liberty IT?
So from a global perspective, there are a couple of things that we're focused on regardless of geography. One of those is really embedding equity mindedness into all of our practices. So we're going through a performance management transformation globally where we are changing every step of the process from bringing people in and onboarding them to evaluating their performance and paying them, building in disruptions to bias along the way. So that will help us really address this in a systemic way. And then the other kind of global initiative for the next couple of years is around allyship. A lot of the things that all of you have said have resonated with me, psychological safety. It's like, how do you measure something if you don't have the data? How do you get the data if people don't trust you? And it's a chicken and egg thing. And you can have ERGs, but if nobody's coming to them, how much progress are you really making? So it's bringing everybody along within your organization. And so we're really going to be focused on allyship. And it's not forcing people to become allies, but leading them along and using leadership, as it's been said, to really demonstrate the value of this to the organization. So linking your DEI strategies to what is your company's purpose, right? What are your values as an organization? What is your strategy? What are your goals? Instead of it being DEI for DEI's sake, let's really focus in on how is this completely aligned to what we're trying to do as an organization. And by the way, as it's been mentioned, these things make us better human beings and they make society better. And so the things that we're dealing with in our corporations are also things that we're dealing with at our kitchen tables, at our family holiday dinners, etc. And so being allies will give you more information to be more educated and be more thoughtful when you're having conversations with folks. So I think it's going to, take a long time for us to get to that point where everybody is truly an ally. And so therefore, I think working on that now is a challenge. And there are lots of things that get in our way that have been mentioned. Sometimes it's political, sometimes it's cultural, sometimes it's regulatory. And so we're going to have to figure out how to navigate those things. And then again, I think that's where I would emphasize the community aspect of this. Is it can be lonely in these roles. It can be exhausting, as been pointed out. And so community at that allyship will be super important to help us to navigate through the next few years.
Yeah, that's a brilliant answer. And what I really love is that I think it's only in recent years that we've kind of moved away from just only talking about the business case. And I know that, we know the business case inside out. We know that more diverse companies drive greater revenue and everything else, but linking it to purpose and linking it to societal issues and culture, and also it being the right thing to do by your people. Like for me, that's always been the justification and why it's important. So yeah, I love that that's kind of your approach to it as well. I'm going to skip to Liz again quickly, just from a perspective, obviously we've had a few changes recently. What do you kind of see the next, it's given that it's Pride Week, specifically for Stonewall and for the LGBTQ plus community, what do you see the big conversations being around, or the big fights to get to it, for LGBTQ people, both in Northern Ireland and more broadly?
I think one of the big ones at the moment is around conversion practices. So some of you will remember that we had a marriage equality campaign, which working with Pride were very involved with, and the role that businesses played in that campaign, successfully winning that campaign. And I think with conversion practices, where this is going to come more and more into the forefront of conversation. And again, it's another space that businesses can think about kind of stepping up, really. And there was a conversation at the panel this morning about being brave, companies being brave. And I think sometimes, businesses need to kind of step up and be brave, like they did for the marriage equality campaign. That certainly isn't the end. That's just the beginning. So conversion practices, we heard it referenced in the King's speech in Westminster, and I think that will be a campaign that we can all get behind. The other big kind of public conversation at the moment is around identity politics. Certainly, we have a really good opportunity at the moment to step up and look at our allyship when it comes to supporting our trans and non-binary friends, family, colleagues and community. They are absolutely at the forefront of, a hideous campaign at the moment, kind of in that wider media space. And there are lots of great resources out there to help you to be a better ally to our trans community who really, really need our help at the moment. You can, again, talk to anybody on the panel here and reach out to us and we can signpost you, certainly. But at the moment, trans lives are quite literally at risk. In Northern Ireland, there is no real support at all for our trans community in terms of access and gender affirming healthcare, and we are losing lives. So thinking about that as a workplace issue, you will have trans people in your organisation. You will have people who have trans friends and family partners in your organisation, and what's going on at the moment in terms of the public conversation will have an impact on those people. So what can you do as D&I leaders, as ERGs or staff network leads to really step up and provide some training, raise some awareness, raise some much needed money to really get behind that community and support them over the next while?
Absolutely. And I love what you said around businesses needing to be brave, and that really echoes what Bobby Pickard said on the panel for the Stonewall conference. We can spend so much time hand-wringing about who we're going to offend with things. Just do it. Whenever we were trying to launch the businesses for marriage equality a few years ago, there obviously was an awful lot of concern around, can we say this, should we back this, how does this look, how will this land? And really it took one or two big players to actually stand up and do the right thing and say, we believe in this is the right thing to do. And there was almost a bit of a snowball effect then. But, I think looking back at that list of 30 or so businesses that signed that at the time, there are some people that are conspicuously absent. And what I say is just don't be absent from this conversation. It's really, really important. So I've been given my wee wave from the sidelines. So we're going to get on to the last question now. And this is going to be for everyone. So I'm going to start, Emma, with you at the top and then work our way up. So obviously a lot of people are here, pardon me, with different DEI roles or interests or people roles. And we did promise takeaways. So in terms of practical strategies, depending on, obviously what stage of your D&I journey that you're on, what would you say is the one piece of advice or tool or strategy that you think is really helpful to someone in their journey within their organisation or just looking to start off?
Yeah, and I think Melanie mentioned it earlier. So any advice I give someone is start where you are at. So, like Danska's gold diversity mark, that's absolutely fantastic, but you might not be there yet. So just start where you're at. Maybe you need a diversity and inclusion strategy, and that's where you start from. Maybe you need a staff network or ERG. Start with the basics, because I just think the basics are your foundation from which to build. And it's bringing the staff along with you as well. I am the worst. I want everything done yesterday. I have very clear views as to where I want it to be. But it has taken me a number of years to realise that that's not going to happen, and you have to bring the workforce with you, and you have to bring your leaders with you, or there's no point. So, maybe, and the best example of this is an organisation I worked for. The first year, they weren't ready to go to Pride, so we did a small breakfast internally, and then the next year, they still weren't ready for Pride, but we went to the breakfast and we joined working with Pride. And then the next year, the senior leaders got involved, and then 5 years down the line, we arrived at Pride and there was hundreds of people there. But that was a journey that I wanted to be at Pride the first year. But you have to bring your staff with you. And then just finally, before I let you move on, is definitely the data. One of the reasons I actually went to BBC is because I saw this range of workforce data that I could get my hands on, and it was intersectional, and I could do all these amazing things with it. And I thought, yes, that's where I want to be at. I want to be able to fairly look at my workforce and see where the gaps are, or why are people not sharing their information, and then working on that. So data, I never thought I'd say, is actually kind of exciting. Don't be scared of it. So definitely your data, go back to basics, start where you're at, and bring your staff with you.
That's brilliant, thank you. And I can definitely relate on the impatience piece. It's a great motivator for a DEI journey, but it very rarely pans out in the long term. So a little bit of patience sometimes isn't the worst. Jude, what about yourself?
I'm going to say the opposite, just to be controversial. Strategies are brilliant, but really it starts with a single step, and it doesn't need to be something really, really massive. I think, for one of the organisations that I was the global LGBTQIA lead, one of the most impactful things was our five-a-side teams were having this big global match. They'd thrown thousands at it. It was all very, very fancy. But because it was near Pride, I sort of thought I was brave. And I thought, do you know what? I know both of the people organising that. I wonder would they want rainbow laces? And it just magically took off. So that all of the sporting events, they were like, oh, can we have laces? And eventually I turned it into a bit like Miranda Priestley. And I'm like, no, if it's tennis, I don't want laces. I want sweatbands. And so, it did sort of snowball a little bit. I think, a lot of, although we're talking about data, I think probably slightly differently. I think weirdly, there's the lack of understanding and the lack of knowledge about what the Pride movement is and what the history of it is, because lots of people, I think, sort of get lost in a sort of digital space, and some random American podcaster tries to explain Belfast Pride to me. Well, I've met the organisers of Belfast Pride and I understand where it came from. And whenever you actually understand the history of, it's particularly emotional. I talked about it this morning. Dublin Pride was really catalysed by the murder of a gay man Declan Flynn in Dublin. And it was that absolute revulsion of all of these people who didn't really know what gay was. They didn't know anything about anything outside of that because this was 1980s Ireland. But they realised that that was fundamentally wrong. And it became like a workplace issue and a trade union issue. And I also think, I have met, I think history is such a lovely, interesting way to sort of challenge your own biases and actually create a base of knowledge for you. I mean, through that, I've met people who've had conversion therapy and have been deeply traumatized. And these are people from their 20s right up to their 70s. And actually, as a lawyer, what they're telling me is they were actually kidnapped and held against their will. And it's really deeply traumatic. And not to steal Liz's other point, but, the trans, non-binary and intersex visibility, people sort of just get a bit lost in sort of Facebook or something that somebody shared, and it's gone a little bit viral. They forget Hayley Cropper on Coronation Street. I do not watch Coronation Street, but each to their own.
Casualty Man?
Yes, I love Casualty. But they had a non-binary character last year, which I love. But on my history talks, whenever I'm talking about Belfast Pride, if you actually see any colour photos or any photos, there were probably about 100, 120 people. I can name you probably about 30 of those people. But one of the organisers was a trans woman, Tina McComb, and she was the actual person who got the rainbow flags, the Gilbert Baker rainbow flags were brought up from Dublin. She met an activist in Dublin, Izzy, and brought them up, or else there would be no rainbows or pride. So that shows how far we come, but it also shows how we've lost a lot of our history along the way. And I think it's wonderful. But then I'm boring a little with that.
No, not at all. And the Heritage Project is genuinely so interesting to me. So, if you're looking for something to do at any stage over Pride, do give Jude a shout. There's lots of really interesting stuff going on. Liz, then one quick top tip then.
Yeah, one quick top tip. I'm going to kind of carry on from what Jude was saying. That there are two, but they're linked. The first would be to listen. So listen to LGBTQ plus voices, listen to a podcast, read a book. The Transgender Issue by Sean Fay would be a recommendation as a starting point. Listen to your LGBTQ plus ERG staff network, talk to your friends and family, but just listen to their lived experience, because there is a kind of preconception that now we've got marriage equality, well, that's it then. But actually our lived experience is very diverse, nuanced, and quite often deeply traumatic. And then speak up. Talk, be brave, say what needs to be said in spaces, know when that needs to be your voice and when that needs to be a voice from our community. So bring people to the table, be an ally. Listen and also speak up.
Brilliant, thank you. Caroline, same question then?
I think broadly. I think, if you're giving people the trust to build up and the networks within the organisation, what is it that you can do to make that work? So think broadly around culture. There is no point in setting out a set of promises that you're going to deliver an outcome, be it in a very linear way, be that on disability, be that on gender, be that on LGBTQ plus IA. And there's nothing you can do that, unless you focus on culture, that will be a long-term sustainable outcome. You'll ask people if they're psychologically safe, and those that feel that they are will say yes. And those that feel that they aren't will say yes. And you're never going to get any movement forward unless you focus on the culture. And that is what will enable proper, sustainable, true progress.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And then Melanie, to have the final word, what's the one message that you want people coming away from today's event to take with them?
Allyship. Seek to understand. She's slightly different words than Liz. Don't make assumptions that you know things about people if you have really no business making those assumptions. Show up for people who are different from you to get an understanding of their lived experiences. Speak up for people, help amplify their voices, And when you see microaggressions taking place, interrupt those, disrupt them, have the courage to be able to give somebody feedback or coaching that they have offended or alienated somebody with their words or behaviors.
Not easy to do, but so important. All right, folks, that's it from us for today. There will be a lunch being served out in the lobby area for the next sort of half hour, 45 minutes or so. Like most of us are sticking around for that. If you have any questions or any comments or anything you want to add to it. But can I please just get one last round of applause for all of our panellists? And then just a huge thank you from me to Liberty for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure and I've really enjoyed this conversation. And other than that, you're free to go. Thank you very much again.